She just wanted to see the place her grandfather built. But they didn't ask, didn't check, just saw her skin, her coat, her silence, escorted her out through the back, before the brunch crowd arrived. But when the manager returned to the lobby and looked up at the gilded portrait above the fireplace, he froze. Because the woman he just shoved onto the sidewalk was the granddaughter of the man who made that hotel possible. And she wasn't just coming to visit. She owned it now. The morning air was cool and still, the kind that made breath visible and memories sharper. Outside the Beaumont Hotel, the pavement gleamed faintly with last night's dew, catching soft glints of gold from the rising sun. Everything about the building whispered old wealth: arched windows, marble columns, a mahogany door polished to near mirror shine. The kind of place where bellboys wore gloves, and silence cost extra. Camille stood just beyond the edge of the valet station, one gloved hand resting gently on a small brass plaque, bolted near the entrance. It was nothing flashy, just a name and a date. E.A. Beaumont, founder 1912. The metal was worn smooth by time, but the letters still held their weight. She didn't smile, didn't pose for a photo, just stood there, the hem of her wool coat brushing against her calves, her curls tucked neatly beneath a felt hat, eyes unreadable. If anyone passing by glanced at her, they wouldn't have thought much. Maybe a guest arriving early. Maybe someone lost. No one asked. The concierge inside was busy folding napkins. The manager had yet to arrive. Staff swept the front steps without looking up. But Camille noticed everything: the cracked tile just beneath the hydrangeas, the faint scratch on the brass, the way the B in Beaumont had begun to fade just slightly faster than the rest. It had been 40 years since she'd last stood there. The last time, her grandfather had lifted her onto his hip and pointed proudly at the plaque. "That's our name," he had said. "Yours and mine." She was too young to understand what that meant then. But she understood now. She let her fingers linger 1 second longer before stepping back, adjusting her gloves like armor. Her suitcase waited behind her, discreet, not flashy. Her car was parked a block away. She hadn't wanted valet, hadn't wanted attention. She came for something older than that. The door opened. A guest walked out, pulling a silver suitcase. He didn't notice her. No one did. Camille stepped inside. The scent of fresh lilies and lemon polish wrapped around her instantly. The same scent they'd used when she was a girl. The lobby looked the same, only glossier, as if someone had tried to make the past more palatable with marble floors and piano music. She stood still, 1 step past the threshold, watching. Nobody greeted her. No one asked if she needed help. And that was the first mistake. The lobby was beginning to hum with quiet precision. Soft jazz played from invisible speakers, just loud enough to mask the clink of cutlery and the distant murmur of housekeeping carts gliding over carpet. A silver tray of champagne flutes rested near the host stand, ready for brunch guests, not for questions. Camille stood near the fireplace, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. The coat she wore was brown wool, well made, but understated. No visible brand, no sparkle. Her shoes were clean, polished, but simple. She didn't scroll her phone, didn't fidget, just stood, observing the space the way someone might study an old photograph that had been retouched too many times. Behind the front desk, the staff stole glances. A woman in that coat didn't usually linger long in places like this. Not without a bellhop. Not without someone saying her name with a clipboard smile. Mr. Lyle noticed her, before she noticed him. He was the kind of man who had made a career out of noticing. The small things. A misplaced napkin, a crooked tie. He moved through the world with a posture that suggested ownership, even when it wasn't his. His suit was pale grey, perfectly tailored, a name tag resting above the pocket, like a signature on a contract he hadn't written but claimed anyway. He stood near the concierge stand, arms folded, eyes narrowing, not with concern, but with calculation. No luggage, no phone in hand, no one beside her. He watched as she stepped toward the edge of the seating area, her gaze trailing over the chandelier above, the original one, restored, not replaced. She paused for a moment near the staircase, just long enough to draw the attention of 2 bellmen, who looked at each other, then back at her. Lyle didn't say anything at first, just made a silent note. The coat was too plain, the presence too still, the vibe off. not dangerous, just unaccounted for, and in his world, unaccounted for often meant unwanted. He took a step forward, past the orchids arranged just so near the check-in counter. His shoes tapped against the marble with soft authority. He straightened his tie, out of habit. She was facing away now, still looking upward. Maybe at the ceiling, maybe at something memory-shaped. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask if she needed anything. Instead, with a polite smile stretched too tightly across his face, he asked the question that always sounded helpful but never was. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you looking for someone?" And just like that, the temperature shifted. Mr. Lyle's shoes made no sound on the marble now. He approached with the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. Tight, rehearsed, dipped in forced charm, the kind used when someone's already decided who you are. Camille didn't move. She turned only slightly, enough to acknowledge him without retreating. "Good morning," he said, the words clipped like ribbon at a ceremony no one invited her to. "Can I help you with something?" She looked at him calmly. Not cold, not deferential. Just, there. "I'm here to see the hotel," she said. Her voice was low and even, like someone naming the weather. No urgency, no explanation. Mr. Lyle blinked. "Well," he chuckled softly, gesturing with a single hand toward the revolving door. "We don't offer public tours, if that's what you're after. Perhaps you're thinking of the cafe just around the corner. They do a nice brunch, a little more casual." He said it lightly, like a suggestion, but there was a weight behind it, a direction, a redirection. Camille didn't move. "No," she said. "I'm here, that was all. Not for brunch, not for a meeting, just here." Mr. Lyle's smile flattened. He stepped just slightly closer, lowering his voice to something meant to sound helpful. "If you're lost, I can have someone escort you back to street level. This area's reserved for guests and members. I'm sure you understand." "I do," Camille said, her tone still steady. "And I'm not lost." That hung there for a moment. The space between them suddenly too quiet. Lyle's eyes flicked down to her coat. No hotel badge, no name tag, no leather folder tucked under her arm with logos embossed in gold. Just stillness. "Well," he said again, but now his tone had dropped the smile entirely. "This area is for registered guests only. If you don't have a reservation, I'll need to ask you to wait outside." He nodded toward the door, casually, but firmly. The decision had been made. And Camille, she just looked at him. Not offended, not angry, just, still. "I'm here to see the hotel," she repeated. And for a moment, that was all either of them said, one clinging to protocol, the other, to truth. The staff behind the counter paused. A bellhop shifted awkwardly near the luggage cart. No one intervened. No one asked questions, and as Lyle gestured for assistance, two junior staff stepping forward in practiced choreography, Camille let out the faintest exhale. She wasn't surprised, only patient. She turned toward the door, before they could touch her, walked without resistance, without flinching, but not far, and not for long. The two staff members moved with the soft choreography of trained hands, polite smiles, shallow steps, arms at their sides. Nothing aggressive, nothing loud, just enough presence to make it clear she was expected to follow. Camille did. She didn't speak, didn't slow. Her heels clicked softly against the marble, then dulled against the rug, then whispered over the brass threshold, as the doorman glanced up, confused, unsure whether to open the door or apologize. He didn't do either. Behind her, the lobby began to fill. The brunch crowd. A woman in pearls adjusting her sunglasses. A couple with weekend luggage rolling behind them like obedient pets. The smell of citrus and warm pastries drifted in with the guests. Mr. Lyle stood near the front desk, watching. His fingers tapped lightly against a folded reservation list. His eyes flicked from Camille to the door, back to his guests. He didn't want attention drawn, didn't want raised voices or hesitation. He wanted the room to remain controlled. Seamless. She made it easy for him. Camille stepped outside into the crisp morning, the hotel's name gleaming above her in gold-plated confidence. She walked down the front steps slowly, the same ones her grandfather had helped design, when the building was nothing but paper plans and steel bones. No one knew that. Not yet. The door closed behind her with a soft click, the kind meant to say nothing. She stood on the sidewalk. The city moved around her. Cars whispered by. A cyclist adjusted his helmet at the corner. A little boy in a puffer jacket pressed his face against the hotel window, fogging the glass, before being gently tugged away by his mother. Camille didn't leave. Not entirely. She crossed the street, found a bench beneath the shadow of a leafless tree, sat down, adjusted her gloves like someone settling in for a wait, not of minutes, but of moments. She could still see the hotel, could still see the bellboys pretending not to glance at the door, still see Mr. Lyle's reflection flicker in the lobby glass. He didn't look out at her. He didn't need to. In his mind, the matter was handled, the threat removed, the lobby clean. But Camille wasn't gone. She was just repositioned. She pulled out a slim leather notebook from her coat pocket, opened it without urgency, jotted something down with a small black pen, then looked up, not at the hotel itself, but at the corner above the entrance, where the founder's name was etched in stone, high above eye level, almost forgotten. Elijah A. Beaumont, the name they polished once a year, the name they never asked her. The side entrance wasn't marked, not with anything obvious, just a brass keypad beside a glass door, and a discreet sign that read Deliveries Administration. Most guests never saw it. It was meant for vendors, for suits, for people with names that lived on ledgers, not keycards. Camille stepped through without pause. A security guard inside glanced up from his clipboard, already rising from his chair before fully registering her face. She didn't need to explain. Not here. Not this time. Miss Beaumont? He asked, voice catching slightly. Right this way. He pressed a button. The elevator arrived almost instantly. She stepped in, alone. The numbers above the door blinked once. Guy, then moved up. By the time she reached the third floor, the glass-walled hallway had already been cleared of foot traffic. A man in a tailored navy suit stood waiting near the reception desk. Mid-50, salt and pepper hair. The kind of person who didn't usually flinch, but today his posture betrayed him. Shoulders just a bit too tight, smile too controlled. Miss Beaumont, he said, his voice trying for warmth. We weren't expecting you until Monday. Camille nodded once, removed her gloves, and reached for the sign-in ledger. No worries, she said softly. Just wanted to stop by. She signed her name in clean, careful script. Camille A. Beaumont, granddaughter of Elijah A. Beaumont. The man didn't speak, just stared at the name. Something in it stopped the room. Camille turned toward the double doors at the end of the hallway. She knew the layout. Had walked it as a girl once, trailing her grandfather's steps. Back then, the carpets had smelled like lemon and starch, and everyone called her sweetheart or young miss. Today no one spoke. The receptionist stood. A message was sent. Quiet. Immediate. Get Mr. Lyle to the executive conference room. Now. Camille didn't wait. She stepped through the doors, and into the long room with floor-to-ceiling windows, polished oak table, and bottled water already lined up like obedient soldiers. She took the seat at the head, the one her grandfather had once occupied. She didn't cross her legs, didn't check her phone, just sat, calm, composed, ready. Downstairs, Mr. Lyle was midway through describing the brunch specials to a travel blogger, when a man in a headset appeared beside him. There's a meeting upstairs, the man said. You're needed. Lyle blinked. Now. The man didn't answer, just nodded once, and turned. Lyle smoothed his tie, puzzled but curious, and followed. The elevator ride was short, silent. When the doors opened, and he stepped into the room, his feet froze. Because there she was, the woman he'd sent away, seated beneath the founder's name, waiting. And for the first time that morning, Mr. Lyle didn't know where to look. The conference room had the hush of money, thick carpet, frosted glass, bottled water sweating lightly onto coasters. No one used. Around the long oak table, a few early arrivals sat murmuring. Low voices, soft rustles of paper, the occasional clink of cufflinks being adjusted. The kind of meeting where nothing was ever said too loudly, and everything meant more than it appeared. At the head of the table, Camille sat with both hands folded in her lap. No laptop, no assistant, no branded portfolio, just presence. She didn't fidget, didn't glance at her watch, the kind of stillness that made other people feel like they were the ones moving too much. Her coat was still buttoned, her back perfectly straight. Across the table, A man with a gold pen cleared his throat. Another tapped something on his tablet, then stopped when no one followed suit. The air began to shift. The door opened. Mr. Lyle stepped in, and time did something strange. He didn't see the table at first, didn't register the water glasses or the notepads or the suits watching him. He saw her, seated at the head of the table, the woman from the lobby, the one he'd dismissed, redirected, escorted out the front like a misplaced coat. She didn't say a word, just turned her head slightly, met his eyes, and held them. Lyle's mouth opened, then closed. His gaze flicked to the others in the room, waiting for someone to explain, but no one did. They were watching him now. All of them. Camille leaned back slightly in her chair. The resemblance wasn't subtle. The sharp cheekbones, the quiet authority in her jaw, the exact tilt of her gaze. She looked like the portrait downstairs, exactly like it. And suddenly, that portrait didn't feel like history anymore. It felt like context. Lyle stepped forward, trying to recover. His voice, when it came, was careful. "Good morning. I wasn't told we had a meeting." Camille didn't answer right away. She let the silence stretch, not awkward, but deliberate, like a pause before a verdict. Then softly, "No, you weren't." She looked at the empty seat across from her, gestured once. "Please, sit." She did, slowly, like someone unsure if the chair was real. Another moment passed. Camille glanced at the others in the room, then back at him. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You didn't recognize me this morning," she said. "That's understandable. You weren't supposed to." Then she folded her hands again, the weight of her presence settling over the table like a dropped stone. And for the first time in his career, Mr. Lyle couldn't manage a smile. The room had gone still, not tense, just quiet, like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't name yet. The hum of the city beyond the windows felt distant, muted beneath layers of glass and silence. Camille sat with the same composed posture, hands still, eyes steady. Mr. Lyle adjusted his cuffs, then his collar. The air conditioning suddenly felt too cold. She didn't raise her voice, didn't lean forward or press. She just asked. "Would you like to explain," she said calmly, "why I was escorted out of the lobby this morning?" Lyle blinked. "No rush," she added, voice soft but absolute. "Take your time." A murmur passed between two of the executives at the far end of the table, quickly silenced by a glance. Lyle cleared his throat, tried again. "I didn't recognize you. I assumed you were." She raised one brow, just slightly. "Assumed," she echoed. His words stalled. Camille's voice, when it returned, was colder than the room. Not cruel, just surgical. "What exactly did you assume, Mr. Lyle?" He hesitated. "That I wasn't a guest, that I didn't belong, that someone in a plain coat, standing quietly, must be in the wrong place." Her questions weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. They landed like raindrops on stone, gentle, but relentless. "I asked to see the hotel," she said. "I didn't ask for a room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break any rules." She paused, let it settle. "Still, you made a decision." Across the table, no one moved. Lyle tried to find footing. "It wasn't personal. I simply followed protocol. When someone who looked like me," she said, her tone turning even quieter. "Is that the protocol?" He flinched, just barely. She folded her hands again, looked down the table, then back at him. "I wasn't lost," she said, her voice clear now. "I was home." And with that the air cracked, not loudly, not with drama, but with the kind of shift that rearranges a room. No one spoke. No one reached for their water, because what could they say to that?
Camille didn't need to explain her lineage.
Not yet. She didn't need to declare her name again, or remind them whose eyes were in that portrait above the fireplace. She had said enough. And in that silence, thick, undeniable, honest, Mr. Lyle finally understood. Not just who she was, but what he'd done. No one reached for their coffee. The silence held, thick with something heavier than embarrassment. Recognition. A shifting of weight in the room, subtle but seismic. Camille let the moment breathe. Then, with the same quiet clarity that had carried her through the front doors that morning, she began. "My grandfather," she said, "was Elijah Beaumont, A murmur passed down the table, the kind people try to swallow. Eyes darted to the others, searching for confirmation, for something to hold on to. Camille didn't flinch. She didn't look for reaction. He opened this hotel in 1912. She continued, but he didn't do it alone. What most people forget, or were never told, is that he started as a bricklayer, a black man with calloused hands and a ledger full of favors. She glanced toward the window. The light shifted slightly across the table, catching the edge of her cheekbone. He built this place stone by stone, negotiated every loan, paid every worker out of pocket. The Beaumont wasn't just named after him. It was made by him. Across the table, one executive looked down, another straightened in his chair, suddenly attentive. When he died, Camille said, her voice quieter now. The story changed. She pulled a small folder from her bag and placed it on the table. Inside, a single printed page, an archived screenshot of the hotel's website from 5 years ago, a biography, full of accolades, carefully worded history. No mention of Elijah. His name had been removed. After his passing, our team, updated the site, removed the section about his early days, replaced his contributions with generic phrases, a visionary founder, a legacy of excellence. The photograph stayed, but the truth was buried. Her hand remained on the folder, gentle, like it held more than paper. You polished the legacy, she said, made it glossy, palatable, easier to explain to investors and guests who didn't want too much complexity with their champagne. No one interrupted, because nothing she said could be denied. You erased the hands that built this place, Camille continued. Not by accident, by design. You made it prettier, quieter, whiter. Lyle shifted, but said nothing. Camille looked at him. I came here today, not for nostalgia, not for brunch. I came because I needed to see what was left. She let that sit. I found the building still standing. The menus glossier, the marble shined, and a lobby that looked through me like I was never part of the story. She sat back, calm, finished, and across the table, no one knew how to meet her eyes. Camille reached into her bag once more. This time she removed a crisp navy blue folder, thicker than the last. No label on the front, just a subtle gold-embossed crest at the bottom corner, Beaumont Holdings. She laid it gently on the table, then slid it forward. Not toward Mr. Lyle, toward the center, toward the truth. These, she said evenly, are the transfer documents. Confirmation of purchase, voting rights, equity breakdown. The folder settled against the polished wood with a soft thud, but the weight it carried was louder than anything said all morning. I'm not here as a guest, she continued, and I'm not here as a memory. She paused. My family has quietly reacquired a controlling interest in the Beaumont Hotel Group. Someone inhaled too sharply. Another cleared his throat and looked at the door like it might offer an exit. Camille didn't flinch. I now own 52% of this property and its subsidiaries, she said, effective as of this morning. Mr. Lyle sat very still. His hands were folded too tightly, his jaw locked in a smile that had nowhere left to go. Camille turned to him, her tone calm, not cruel, just factual. My grandfather was pushed out of leadership near the end of his life, promised honorary titles, while real decisions were made in rooms he was no longer invited into. Her gaze didn't waver. We don't repeat history, we repair it. She leaned back slightly. My first action as majority shareholder is to initiate a full review of leadership conduct and cultural sensitivity protocol, starting today. She let that land. Every department, every floor, every manager, including especially hospitality. Lyle opened his mouth. Camille raised a hand. This is not personal. It's structural. She looked around the table. It's about how power gets used, how assumptions get made, and what happens when no one questions the patterns we pretend are professionalism. Silence. No one met her gaze now, not even the ones who had smiled at her before the meeting began. Camille turned back to Lyle. There will be a formal conversation later, she said. HR, legal, due process. She softened her voice just slightly. But let me be clear, Mr. Lyle, this morning wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was a display of everything this hotel claims it isn't. He blinked. Once, slowly. And still she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because every word had landed where it was meant to. And the message was clear. She hadn't just reclaimed a building, she'd reclaimed its memory. And now she would decide what stayed, and what had to go. It happened quietly. No press release, no ribbon cutting, just a few maintenance staff on a Tuesday morning, a stepladder, and 2 gloved hands handling a frame with careful precision. Elijah Beaumont's portrait remained above the fireplace. Same gold trim, same commanding gaze, but it was shifted slightly, just enough to make room for the new frame beside it. Camille A. Beaumont. Same jawline, same steady eyes. Her portrait wasn't grand, just dignified. A soft grey background, a simple plaque beneath, legacy restored, majority shareholder, 2024. By noon guests had noticed. They stood near the fireplace, coffee cups in hand, pretending to check their phones while sneaking glances upward. Some asked quietly at the front desk. Others whispered in the elevator. Was that the woman from the story? She looks like him, doesn't she? The staff had new scripts now, new training, not just in service, but in awareness, in presence, in seeing what they'd been taught to overlook. There were still stumbles. A bellboy forgot a name. A front desk agent hesitated too long when a guest didn't match the reservation photo. But it was changing. Not loudly, not all at once, but undeniably. The brunch menu now had a founder's table section, dishes inspired by Elijah's original kitchen notes, restored from the archives, Camille found in a basement file. The history brochure no longer skipped the first 4 decades. A new section was added to the hotel website. Our Real Beginnings. Mr. Lyle's office sat empty. The staff didn't speak much about it, just nodded when asked. Leadership transition, they said. A new chapter. Camille didn't take his office. She worked from the glass-walled conference room upstairs, the same one where the silence had first changed everything. Sometimes she walked the lobby in the early morning, before the guests were up, before the linens were folded, just her and the quiet hum of lights. She always paused by the fireplace. Never lingered, never stared, just paused. Guests kept asking, who is she? What happened? Why is her portrait there? And every time someone would whisper the story. The woman they asked to leave, the name that stopped the room, the air no one expected, until they looked up. Because now the lobby didn't just tell a story of polished floors and 5-star service. It told the truth, and the truth had a face. The sky was overcast that morning. Pale grey clouds stretched low across the city, softening the edges of buildings and muffling the sound of passing cars. The hotel stood as it always had, regal, symmetrical, untouched by the weather. But something beneath its surface had shifted. Camille approached without urgency. Same brown wool coat. Same calm walk, one hand in her pocket, the other holding nothing at all. She didn't check her phone, didn't glance at the windows above. She knew what waited on the other side of the glass. As she reached the front steps, the doorman, new, younger but alert, stepped forward with a quiet nod and opened the door wide. Welcome back, Miss Beaumont. No hesitation, no second guessing. Camille returned the nod, eyes steady. Thank you. Inside, the lobby still glowed gold and cream, but now there was something different in the way the room acknowledged her. The air didn't tighten, no curious glances, no nervous smiles, just space being made without being asked. The hostess near the dining room caught sight of her, and bowed slightly, not dramatically, just respectfully. She said nothing, but her eyes held something honest, awareness. Camille walked past the fireplace. The portraits hung side by side now. A quiet dialogue between past and present, a family resemblance that no longer needed explaining. She didn't stop to look, she didn't need to. Behind the front desk stood a woman in a dark blazer, shoulders square, posture warm but professional. The new manager. She smiled, not the smile of someone trying to prove something, but of someone who already knows. Good morning, Miss Beaumont, she said. We've set aside the founder's lounge for your meeting. And the chef wanted you to know the cornbread muffins are just how your grandfather liked them. Camille's eyes flicked upward at that. Just slightly. She nodded. That's appreciated. The manager stepped aside. Whenever you're ready. No one rushed her. No one watched her walk away. Outside, the clouds held, heavy and quiet. But inside the Beaumont, light filtered through the tall windows like something had finally been let in. Camille paused near the stairs. looked once at the brass plaque by the elevator, the one they'd re-etched last week. Elijah's name restored. The font matched now. The age didn't show. She touched it once, a soft press of her fingers. Then she turned. And for the first time in that hotel, Camille A. Beaumont wasn't being tolerated. She was being seen. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, unseen or dismissed, don't let it end here. Share this story with someone who needs to remember where real power comes from. Comment below with your thoughts or a time you were overlooked, until the truth came out. Let this be a reminder. Legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks back through the front door, calm, steady and undeniable.